So I finally made the switch over from Final Cut Express 4 to Final Cut Pro 10, and I just kind of want to share the stress that I've been going through during the past week. And as it turns out, all of the legacy versions of Final Cut do not work with macOS High Sierra, and I've been using Final Cut Express 4 for the past 8 years, so that was really just a kick in the balls. So after a few days of just crying, I finally decided that it was time to buckle down and learn Final Cut Pro 10. So I went to the Apple website and downloaded the 30-day free trial of Final Cut 10.4, and I've been using it for maybe about a week now, and I just want to make this video to share my experience of pretty much relearning Final Cut. So first off, I have always honestly just hated the idea of Final Cut Pro 10, and I decided that I would never ever stop using Final Cut Express. But now I am basically being forced to use Final Cut Pro 10, and after buckling down and just forcing myself to use it, I can admit that there are some good things about Final Cut Pro 10 and some bad things about Final Cut Pro 10. So I guess let me get all of the negative stuff out of the way. Right off the bat, I'm going to admit that I still freaking hate this interface. I know that a lot of people have been complimenting Final Cut Pro 10, saying that, you know, it's a really clean and modern design. And I will give that to them, like, it is a really clean and modern design for Final Cut. But with that being said, it's honestly not something that I would want to see out of a pro video editing software. To be honest, like, just based on the interface, I think it is worthy of the name that a lot of people have been giving it, which is iMovie Pro. It does feel a lot like iMovie, and of course I'm gonna acknowledge that to some people that is definitely an advantage. If you're coming from iMovie and going to Final Cut Pro 10, then that's an awesome sort of upgrade for that. But in my personal experience, I've honestly never liked iMovie. I think what I always loved about Final Cut Express and, you know, Final Cut Pro 7 is that it was pretty much just left up to the user. You could pretty much do anything in Final Cut Express and Final Cut Pro 7, where I feel like with Final Cut Pro 10, it's a lot like iMovie in that it does a lot of hand-holding for you. And for me, that's not really what I'm looking for in like a pro video editing software. I guess I just like the whole idea of, you know, just having everything available to you and just, you know, being able to do anything you want with it. To be honest, that was like one of the main problems I have with Final Cut Pro 10, just the amount of sort of hand-holding and sort of just doing things for you, I guess. But I don't know, it basically just feels really restricted. Other than that, there have been like a few little minor inconveniences. It might just sound like nitpicking, but to be honest, like all of these little minor inconveniences add up and just make me really frustrated. And I guess like one of these minor inconveniences is the changes in keyboard shortcuts. Unlike Final Cut Express 4, where, you know, you had a lot of the sort of buttons already exposed to you, where in Final Cut Pro 10 it relies heavily on keyboard shortcuts. And to be honest, like a lot of the shortcuts are just like really convoluted shortcuts. For example, in order to separate the audio and video tracks, you have to do, I think it's Control-Shift-S. Where in, you know, Final Cut Express and Final Cut Pro 7, all you had to do to separate the video and audio tracks was press Command L. It was a lot more simpler shortcuts, and so, you know, in Final Cut Pro 10 you have to pretty much just do like Twister with your fingers. So anyway, I don't know, I don't want to rant too much about Final Cut Pro 10. It's honestly one of the times when making something too simple makes it complicated. Now with all of that being said, I kind of want to go and look on the positive side of things now. One thing that I have noticed with Final Cut Pro 10 is that it honestly has been feeling like a guilty pleasure for me. Even though I get angry at it and frustrated and, you know, a lot of times I will curse at Final Cut Pro 10, I honestly find myself always wanting to go back to it. If anything, I don't know, I think it proves how much I love just making videos. Even though I get really frustrated at the software, I just really want to learn it, and I really want to be able to be good at it. The really big thing that I freaking love about Final Cut Pro 10 is the automatic synchronizing of clips. In case you guys don't know, I often use an external microphone. I use the Blue Yeti and I hook it up to my computer and record through USB. And one of the biggest pains in the butt with Final Cut Express was that whenever I would sync up my video with, you know, the external audio, 5 or 10 minutes later into the clip, it will start to go out of sync. I think people call it like drifting or something. But with Final Cut Pro 10, you can use automatic synchronizing, and so far from my experience, it has pretty much perfectly synced the clips, and it doesn't even go out of sync. So that has honestly made my life a whole lot easier, and I love that about Final Cut Pro 10. Another thing that I love about Final Cut Pro 10 is automatic rendering, and this is something that, I don't know, I'm kind of on the fence about. I love the fact that it automatically renders for you. You don't even have to wait for rendering, you can just start playing the video, but at the same time, you know, the fact that it automatically renders for you kind of takes up a lot of my hard drive. So in general, I guess I have found it more of a positive thing than a negative thing. And finally, like, I don't really know if this is necessarily a positive thing, but what I have found is that Final Cut Pro 10 works very well for vlogs. Like, if there is one perfect use for Final Cut Pro 10, it would be to edit vlogs. And basically the reason I say that is because Final Cut Pro 10 uses what they call the magnetic timeline or whatever. Basically what that means is, you know, you can cut a clip, and once you delete a section from that clip, it'll automatically bring the two ends of the clip together. So far, I found that it works really well for vlogs. For a lot of things though, it honestly doesn't really work that well, and I've been getting really frustrated with the magnetic timeline, especially when I'm doing more sort of complicated stuff, mainly like music videos. Other than that, those are the main positive things that I found with Final Cut Pro 10 so far. And that pretty much wraps up my first impressions of Final Cut Pro 10 after switching over from Final Cut Express. In general, you know, even though it's radically different than all of the previous versions of Final Cut, it's gonna take some time, but you know, I think I can get used to this. Ask me again in maybe a couple months how I'm liking Final Cut Pro 10. Anyway, if any of my viewers out there are video editors and you've been using Final Cut Pro 10, let me know what you guys think of it in the comments. But thank you for watching this video, and I will talk to you guys again soon. Bye!